Ready? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava. You can sing too, okay? You can't sing. Sorry. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Ashtotartha Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Ashtotartha Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shri Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Shyamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Swami Ki Jai Ganga Mehi Ki Jai Yamuna Mehi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Now I'm too hot. Winter coat. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiried. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayesha bodreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama shloke Bhakti bhavati naistiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On the second day of April 2026 in San Diego, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 9, entitled Liberation. Chapter 18, King Yayati regains his youth. And we'll be reading texts 24 and 25 today. I'll do 24 myself. Gate rajani sadire tattva smarududati patuhu nivediyat tatak sarvam uktang sharmishtaya kritam. Translation. Therefore, when the learned king returned to his palace, Devyani returned home crying and told her father Shukracharya. The learned king is Yayati. She told her father Shukracharya about all that had happened because of Sharmishta. She told how she had been thrown into the well, but was saved by the king. Text 25. Okay. Durmana Bhagavan Kavyaha. Durmana Bhagavan Kavyaha. Kavya. Parohityam Vigarhayan. Parohityam Vigarhayan. Stuvan Vrittim Cha Kapotim. Stuvam Vrittim Cha Kapotim. Duhitra Sa Yayao Purat. Duhitra Sa Yayao Purat. Durmana Bhagavan Kavya. Parohityam Vigarhayan. Stuvan Vrittim Chakapotim. Duhitra Sayayao Purat. Durmana Bhagavan Kavya. Parohityam Vigarhayan. Stuvan Vrittim Chakapotim. Duhitra Sayayao Purat. Durmana Bhagavan Kavya. Parohityam Vigarhayam. Stuvan Vrittim Chakapotim. Duhitra Sayayao Purat. Ramapati? Oh, the voice. No? Durmana Bhagavan Kavya. Parohityam Vigarhayan. Stuvan Vrittim Chakapotim. Duhitra Sayayao Purat. Durmana Bhagavan Kavya. Hityam Vigarhayan. Stuvan Vrittim Chakapotim. Duhitra Sayayao Purat. Aditya? Durmana Bhagavan Kavya. Parohityam Vigarhayan. Stuvan Vrittim Chakapotim. Duhitra Sayayao Purat. You can do it, Naveen. Durmana Bhagavan Kavya. Parohityam Vigarhayan. Stuvan Vrittim Chakapotim. Duhitra Sayayao Purat. Anyone online want to try? Guess they're not with us today. Okay. Durmanaha, being very unhappy. Bhagavan, the most powerful. Kavyaha, Shukracharya. Paurohityam, the business of priesthood. Vigarhayan, condemning. Stuvan, praising. Vrittim, the profession. Cha, and. Kapotim, of collecting grains from the field. Duhitra, with his daughter. Saha, he, Shukracharya. Yayao, went. Parat, from his own residence. Translation. As Shukracharya listened to what had happened to Devayani, his mind was very much aggrieved. Condemning the profession of priesthood and praising the profession of uncha vritti, collecting grains from the fields, he left home with his daughter. Purport. When a Brahmin adopts the profession of a kapota, or pigeon, he lives by collecting grains from the field. This is called uncha vritti. Uncha vritti. A Brahmana who takes to this uncha vritti profession is called first class because he depends completely on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and does not beg from anyone. Although the profession of begging is allowed for a Brahmin or a sannyāsī, one does better if he can avoid such a profession and completely depend on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for maintenance. Shukracharya was certainly very sorry that because of his daughter's complaint, he had to go to his disciple to beg some mercy, which he was obliged to do because he had accepted the profession of priesthood. In his heart, Shukracharya did not like his profession, but since he had accepted it, he was obliged to go unwillingly to his disciple to settle the grievance submitted by his daughter. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So we're following this account of the Shukracharya, the head priest here, the Brahmin, and his daughter Devayani, who has been cursed. We find out that she won't be able to have a husband who's a Brahmin. And I think that maybe it was Sharmista who cursed her. Yeah. So the result is that Sharmista was very angry with her and threw her naked into a well. Was it Devayani who took Sharmista's clothes, or the other opposite? I think they went to bathe. Sharmista took. Devayani got angry and Sharmista threw her into the well. So the result was, okay, she's naked in the well, she could drown there, so Yayati comes, and he hears her, and he lifts her out, and she sees she's naked and she's beautiful. And so now she says, well, you'll have to marry me now because you touched me, and like that. So now there's this pratiloma marriage in the offing, because it's a lady who's from a higher caste marrying someone from a lower caste. And Kshatriya is lower than Brahman. So then she goes to her father, Shukracharya, and he's upset with the whole thing, and he takes his daughter with him, right, and goes to take this profession of just gathering grains from the field, which is, and it's a more surrendered position than just doing what do they call it, madhukari, right, in Vrindavan or wherever it is, where you go home to home. Now you go to the field and you're looking for grains that have fallen, and in this way you're completely dependent on the Lord. So that's what Prabhupada says here. So this is not resolved yet, because Shukracharya is very upset with Yayati, and he curses him, right, to lose his youth. So he's an old man, And but I think that Yati begged for some, some mercy, and so he got, okay, if you can get someone to give you their youth and vitality, then you don't have to accept it. So his son, I forget the name of the son, one of Yati's, Puru, he does that. So what do we learn from this? Well, one thing I think that I learned when I first read this, and it seems to be a great lesson, and is the what do you say, the unknowable things that you're in for if you allow yourself to become entangled in marriage. Yes, it can be if you set it up as in your home as a place of God and so forth. So it's possible, and we know there are many instances in our line of wonderful householders with children even, who are very, very good devotees. Lord Chaitanya himself took the role of being married, and his leading disciples, such as Advaitacharya, wasn't a direct disciple, but you know what I mean, it's associates, Sridhar Pandit, they were all, and Nityananda even, they were householders for some time anyway. So it's possible, but it can lead to all kinds of frustration and entanglement. And so Prabhupada set it up, the Brahmacharya ashram. If you can do it, then you should do that, and eventually take sannyas, if possible. But it certainly does simplify your life. Let's put it that way. It's just. I've seen. I'll give you. I won't name any names, but this. I used to go to Alacha every year and visit my friend Indra Pramad, and there's a lot of householders there. Seniors, many of them are Prabhupada disciples, and they're living there. I think this is, many of them would think, well, what about Vanaprastha, right? But then Vanaprastha is generally not going to happen. They're getting older, and their wives and things. So this was a devotee who had been a close associate or friend of Gunagrai Maharaj, and I knew him, so I would say, Haribol, how you doing? And when I saw him there, I forgot his name, he looked very troubled. And I asked him, what's happening? Are you okay? He said. So he more or less shook his head, and he told me, no, my son stole $60,000 from me. Can you imagine? He was, he was probably helping him in his business. He had, he was able to use his accounts, and boom, he took $60,000. So you can imagine how painful something like that is. So here, Shukracharya is going through a similar thing now. His daughter is married, this Pratiloma marriage, and she was, thrown into the well and the whole thing. So his answer is, well, okay, we'll both renounce together. I think she's with him, helping to pick up the grains, I guess. So anyway, it can be very challenging, because when you have, in ISKCON, in Bhakti Yoga, the whole point is that you're acknowledging, you're accepting that your main relationship, your eternal relationship with Krishna, and with all the residents of Goloka Vrindavan. And you're in this temporary relationship with this person, your mother, father, and this and that. But I remember when I first started reading the second canto, I think right near the beginning, Prabhupada talks about this analogy of bubbles in the ocean coming together for temporary and then being thrown apart, or flotsam and jetsam. Have you ever heard that? Flotsam, like little things floating in the ocean that that just get wooden things, and they may come together and make a little clump for a while, and then the ocean, whatever, and then they separate. So our lives are like that. People who are just living ordinary lives. You get married, you think, oh, this is my eternal soulmate, and then there's children, although nowadays young people are much more reluctant to have children. I don't know if you know that. It's kind of a demographic crisis all over the world. But, and there's so many entanglements. You don't know, just like things that can happen some chronic disease, that your child has, and you have to deal with that. And getting your daughters married, that's an essential thing. But who's going to really do the whole astrology thing, as was mentioned in the early thing, so that it's compatible and it has a very good chance of being successful. So the overall lesson for me anyway in this is that in the material consciousness in which you're allowing yourself to be attached and attracted to all kinds of things, and especially through sex life and marriage, it can be just like a big, what do they call it? A big rock hanging around your neck. If you really want to make spiritual advancement, and so it's a gamble. But if one is really within the Krishna consciousness, and you accept the Shastra, and there's some other lady who is also serious devotee, and you can see that, then it's possible to have it in success and raise the children nicely. So that we have our brahmachari ashram here, which happens to be vacant now for a while, but it's available. That those rooms are now reserved. We'll see how that works out over time. But that's this is the lesson, and the Bhagavatam gives all kinds of lessons that are very memorable. This past time, and it's something to consider. I'm sorry. Forgot to turn this thing off. Okay. It says scam likely, so I don't have to worry about it too much. All right, any discussion on this verse? I know we don't go on to the next verse, but we'll keep discussing it if you want, this passage and this purport here. Okay, finished.
Shamish's father was his disciple?
Shamish's father was
disciple? Is that right?
I don't know, I've lost track of all of the relationships. Yeah, look that up.
At least, so, because here Shukracharya, he's condemning the profession of priesthood and praising the profession of uncha vritti. And so initially I'm thinking, okay, what's the relevance there? And so maybe you commented on it. The relevance is that because he's now going to go to Shamishta's father and beg, and that's why he's criticizing begging, that because the purport to 25, is that the relevance here? That what's Shamishta's father's name again? Rishabharva. He's going to go to Rishabharva. That's the disciple he's going to go beg mercy from? Is that what's being discussed?
I was hoping that someone else would lead the Guru Puja, and I would be able to take some time to prepare, but there was no one here, and I had to lead the Guru Puja. Yeah. So I didn't have time to really investigate this as I had hoped this morning.
Well, here's something. I have a question that maybe you could shed light on. I brought it up yesterday at breakfast, and we were talking about it a little bit, but I haven't researched it much yet, so I haven't figured it out. But it's coming up in this chapter, and so I could ask it when it comes up more directly, but maybe now, if you have something to share, you could say something. With this idea of maidservants in general, and so like elsewhere in Bhagavatam, I can't remember exactly, I just remember the idea being that certain princesses especially would have many maidservants.
Yes.
And I don't even remember if it's clear what caste are those maidservants. But anyway, so she has maidservants, and then when she's married, those maidservants follow her to her husband's home. Yeah. And then what is going on with those maidservants? Do they have their own husbands? Are they somehow like wives of that husband? Does it vary case by case?
I don't. There's no formal marriage certainly with them, but I remember one passage I just read it recently that yes, and sometimes they also get pregnant from the husband. It's kind of this. They're there. They're basically helping friends, all friends of the wife, but they're also. There doesn't seem to be a scandal around that. That's just understood, right? Is that what's going on? They also get children. They have children, and who are then dependent on the king. It obviously has to be someone who has quite a lot, can support all them. So it's a big industrialist or a king, and they serve as sometimes mates for the husband.
So as far as you see, is that like always the case, or at least like the standard general case with a maidservant, that a maidservant is something like another partner of the husband? That's basically they're friends of the wife, but they're also available, to do that with the wife's approval, obviously. That they can also have sex with the husband. If you're strictly following, Prabhupada, the thing about, when the wife gets pregnant, then there's no more sex until after the birth, right? Because if you're doing it strictly, sex is only for recreation. Well, that's already gone on. So this is a facility for the husband to still, be able to have sexual relations but not with his wife. That's my impression. Mm-hmm. That's my impression. And some of these, many maidservants, hundreds, the marriages that we read about in the Bhagavatam, there's a lot of them. The king can support them. So it's apparently a tradition. It's part of the Vedic culture. Certainly not part of the ISKCON culture, at least not intentionally. Yeah, and I'm wondering if that, because some things, sometimes with certain things that are there in, I'm trying to think of an example. I don't know, maybe there are certain things in Vedic culture or in the Bhagavatam that someone would explain by saying, well, those are descriptive but not prescriptive. We aren't saying that this is like an ideal arrangement, but this is something that does inevitably go on, something like prostitution. It's allowed, but we aren't encouraging prostitution, and a world where there was no prostitution would be better than without it. Whereas certain things like polygamy, those aren't seen as unfortunate. Those are seen as actually part of a good system to make sure that
women can have
the best options for women to be married. But the maidservants thing really bewilders me because it just doesn't seem like. I'm also wondering. Well, first, to finish that sentence, it doesn't seem like such a nice arrangement for those girls. So it's hard for me to imagine that any father would arrange that as his daughter's, marriage or like non-marriage arrangement. And then, in addition to that, I'm just wondering. Then is that considered illicit sex? What exactly?
Marapati, you
like all girls
any
are
answers to this?
Practically, a father's supposed to make an arrangement so his daughter can have children and have protection and so on. The protection's there. I guess the children could be there. So is that like as good as a marriage? Here, some verses back, it was saying that it wasn't like Devayani and Iyati. It wasn't like marriage. Basically, they're married now. Remember, it's something like just by holding her hand.
Yeah, you touched me. I was naked. Right?
Yeah. So like as if like that counts. So we're good. Like that. Like it's not. Basically, they're.
Yeah.
So, and there are some other places where it talks about marriage like that not that you aren't considered married until you have like an official marriage ceremony. So I'm wondering, and it's not such an important question, but I'm wondering, like, are these maidservants, is that just like a valid, like, licit relationship between a man and a woman, something like that, between someone, a man and a maidservant?
What do you think, Brahmana?
Present day, when the maidservant, the friends go to the girl's house. Usually they get back and they spend a few nights and they stay there, and then to make her comfortable, and they get back home. But
they go back home.
Yeah. Even now it's still there.
Well, that's a whole different thing. Just to set up the marriage, and because she's lonely, she's her friends, right? These are close. Yeah, that's another thing.
But
so that seems more reasonable. said, you know, all these young girls suddenly they don't have a future in their own husband, and they're just hanging out with their old friend, you know.
Someone asked when I brought this up at breakfast yesterday something about mantra with Dasharatha, that like mantra, like was she, not that maybe we just don't have the information, but someone like that, was she really just a maidservant for life, and she just never had children, never had a husband or anything like it, and that was just her lot that her father arranged for her? So of course, I don't know if we have any, have you ever heard anything about mantra, her backstory?
She's a churner, that's all we know.
But it just seems incongruous with Vedic culture that any woman would, like, by her father, be put in some arrangement where doesn't really have a good facility for having children. And so the maidservant thing, like, maybe yes, maybe no.
I've never heard, you know, Prabhupada really discuss it. I mean, when it comes up in the Bhagavatam, he describes, you know, that this is their function.
Well, if I ever put time into it and I figure anything out, maybe I'll bring it back into class, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to go on to the next verse. And the amount of lessons that we can draw from this basically is that don't get entangled in family, in household life if you can help it. Or, you know, if you have a nice Vaishnava wife, that's another thing. But you never know what's going to happen. Like that, you know, poor guy, he raised his kid in ISKCON, and then he stole $60,000. What if, you know, he loves his son, and he's not going to turn him into the police, you know, but oh God, just too much.
There's a bit here in this purport about brahmanas and sannyāsīs and begging, and how better for them not to beg and just to depend on things they just find. And when these things come up, I wonder, at least in ISKCON, when we talk about expectations for brahmanas, it seems like nothing like that. And if someone were to even inch toward, not even that, just inch toward maybe more renunciation, even like not having a smartphone, they'd be criticized for, like, you know, not following Yukta Vairagya, you know.
I'd rather not eat than not have a smartphone.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you understand, like, that there are these instructions for brahmanas and sannyāsīs, but then sannyas culture, let's say if you just isolate on sannyas culture, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did give harsh criticisms of his sannyāsīs who were taking care of their bodies too much, or they'd use the temple card to go to the doctor or something like that. You know, he said, and they saw that as inappropriate. So, and we don't even like follow. But even what he allowed would be criticized by more traditional considerations of sannyas, or you know, expectations of sannyas. But even he makes that long list for his sannyāsīs, or maybe brahmacharis also, you know, about basically wanting them to like get off the bodily platform. And looking at it, it's like, oh yikes! Like, I'm really on the bodily platform, and am I supposed to follow that? Even his list seems like something that if you were to try to follow that now, most would say that that's impractical and don't do that, or at least unnecessary. But even that is not as strict as actual, like what Shastra talks about sannyas. And so how do we understand all that?
You know, the thing is, the sannyasa ashram, it has to be supported by the environment that it's in, and that's why I've often thought, how does it really work in the West? Okay, because I've been thinking all of these older aging couples, you know, in Alatra. I mean, ideally they're supposed to do vanaprastha, then the lady goes home and it's supported by the elder, you know, one of the elder sons, like that, right? That's the idea. And then the husband can take full sannyas rather than. But where are you going to find that kind of support now? You know. That's really the problem, and oftentimes these elder children, like with this fellow, they're also involved now, trying to survive. He's got a business. Okay, let me join the business. You know, so without that support, the traditional sannyas profile is very difficult to envision in Western society. I mean, you go to India. And you know, when Prabhupada takes sannyas, and they're honored generally, right? Even, I mean, this is a thing. they'll be invited in. Just like when Prabhupada, he's trying to raise money for the Bombay temple. And famously, disciples like Giriraj, I don't know if it was a Swami at that time, probably not. But it didn't matter, he was in orange, and he was renounced, and he was representing Prabhupada, who became famous. And so he was welcomed in, and people would, give substantial donations, become life members, that whole life member thing, So it really depends, on the culture, what rules you can actually observe. And but it's dangerous, because you find sannyāsīs, well, okay, I have to travel. Well, that's like every time I travel, it's $1,000 in an airplane ticket, So you have to raise substantial amounts of money if you're going to travel. And how do you do that? And then you have to have a bank account. And that doesn't seem to be, certainly not anything that you would find supported in the Bhagavatam. So there's always like a clash. How much of the tradition can you really expect ISKCON to embrace when the larger society is so, it's just not set up to really support it. This temple here, for instance, I know that before I came, especially in the early 80s, if you look at the graphs, the early 80s was like the biggest time for book distribution, actually. You had these new gurus, and a lot of their disciples were fired up, and everything was booming. This temple, you had, 50 devotees going out, doing books distribution, and Lakshmi coming in. And I remember one of the things that Bhadrinarayan Swami told me, long before he took sannyas, is that he was hoping to do something like what Denver did, which was that they a lot of Lakshmi coming in, and they put, they bought houses nearby, and when they had mortgages which they could support. The BBT was saying, no, you should send all the money here. But Savas, he was there in Denver, he was the president there at that time. And if you go there, just like in LA, you have this large community, and they own half the block, and you can have a householder community and all these different things. But that is no longer the case. But you do have, instead of a team of devotees going out collecting at least $100 a day, selling books, a very favorable Indian community who supports. And I remember when I came here, I'm sure you've heard of him, Dr. Majumdar. He wasn't in the line of Prabhupada. He wasn't initiated by one of Prabhupada's disciples or by Prabhupada himself. He had some Babaji, Rikadakun Babaji. But he loved the deities here, and he would come. I think, just as a default, he'd give $10,000 a month, something like that, right? I mean, okay, yeah. But he was the main donor, supporting. Yeah. And so, and then you have so many others, and there's Marcy. Everyone knows about Marcy. I'm not going to, Hare Krishna, she's probably listening in now. But she's helped to support the temple very substantially. So it's a whole different thing. It's not like, that individual sannyāsīs are going out and just approaching, knocking on doors and getting some donation that they can live on. They're supported by the society, and they're supported by individuals who, I would really like you to come here and preach. All right, we'll buy you a ticket, so that's a few $100s, when you come and support. So that's one of the things, that we have to deal with, how to maintain the spirit, brahmachari spirit, and the sannyas spirit, which is one of renunciation and complete dependence on Krishna, in a different environment where it's not, the particular society is not going to, immediately bow down to you if they see you, as a sannyasi. But the principles have to be there, and if we really are serious about advancing a Krishna consciousness, and we're chanting nicely and so forth, then we'll be able to do without so much. You mentioned the smartphone. That's probably the last thing to go. You don't want to give up. But it's also a danger. I remember I don't know if I told this story, but in Alachua, they had a very nice school run by Lakshmi Moni. This was for the girls, and she had a great experience, And then I came one year, and the school had been dissolved, and it was maybe a year later that I asked, well, what happened with the school, And she told me that, well, some of the girls, their parents bought them smartphones, cell phones. And so then all the other girls had to have one, so they all have smartphones. But with that, you have, anyway, the end point was that we had also a boys' school, part of the Gurukul. So they started texting each other and FaceTiming, and all this stuff. And it was undermining the spirit of the school of renunciation, and so she had to close it. But that's one of the things, the dangers of the technology, is that so much is coming through this, and even in some places they're trying to outlaw them for kids in grade school because they see how distracting it is, and the girls get on there, and before long they're being cyberbullied, and it's a 14-year-old. It's an amazing. Of course, it can be a tremendous asset for Krishna consciousness, for preaching. The Zoom calls. I remember when we had, the pandemic came, and even to be in class, people didn't want to come, but we had all these Zoom classes that started then, which are invaluable. So, but this whole adventure here, this thing is different lessons, and it's just, if possible, try to avoid it, the entanglement. Try to chant and get attracted, reading Krishna book and doing Krishna consciousness. There's so much transcendental pleasure available there. And the more that you can experience it through sincere chanting and hearing, the less you'll be feel compelled, to have relations with, sex relations and things like that. It is possible to do it. And that's what Prabhupada hoped, that he would have some serious lifelong brahmacharis with him, become sannyāsīs and preach. And he was successful in doing that. But each generation has to fight its own battles and accept the challenge. And places like this, we're so fortunate. Every time I come, as you probably know, I come early in the morning and set up the Mangalartik too. And it's so enlivening just to be able to see the deities and to offer prayers. And there's so many wonderful prayers, if anyone's interested, that I've learned, over the years from the books, and Queen Kunti's prayers, and so many others. And that hearing and chanting. It's like I was hearing Prabhupada's lectures on the Kunti's prayers, which then became the book, The Teachings of Queen Kunti. And there's this, one of the ones he liked to quote, Bhavesmin Klishyamananam avidya kama karma bhi Shravana smaranarhani kadishani dikechana. She's explaining, she's saying why Krishna came. This is one of the reasons he came. So, Bhavesmin, here, in the world of birth and death and change, which is full of suffering, Klishyamananam. Why? Avidya kama karma bhi. Because people are in such ignorance that they perform actions on the basis of karma, and they get karma karma bhi. So this is the nature of the material world in 2 lines. So you came in order to revive the process of hearing and chanting about you. Shravana smaranarhani kadishani dikechana. Out of mercy. To give, there's one verse which I can't remember the Sanskrit, where Krishna says, I appear in my human form, the reason, in order to enact these very attractive lila that then will give substance for my devotees to hear and chant about. In other words, he renews that, and so that becomes current. So that it's a very powerful antidote for the sense gratification. To read, Prabhupada gave us Krishna book, of course, everyone can read that. But these beautiful verses in the Bhagavatam, not just the 10th canto, the prayers of Queen Kunti, they cleanse the heart and invoke the mercy of Krishna, so that we can get more and more attracted to him and more unattracted to Maya. which is yukta vairagya we're trying to find, you know, and we should really aspire to attain that state. Okay, we got to 8:35. I'm sorry I wasn't able to do more illumination on this, but that's what we got. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.